Because what we need to do is we need to send America a message. We need to send the entire world a message. When I was in Israel, an advisor to Benjamin Netanyahu looked at me and he said, Bob, when you choose in Iowa the next president, make sure you choose well. We need to stand in the gap as Iowans. We need to stand in the gap as Americans. Stand in the gap with Ted Cruz and send a message to America. Send a message to the world that we're choosing well. We're choosing Ted Cruz to be the next president of the United States. And standing with me and standing with Ted Cruz, showing the spirit of unity. The first time that he and I have been behind the same presidential candidate. But a guy that he and I would go way back. We have the same constitutional DNA. We have the same makeup. A guy that you know well. Please give a warm welcome for Iowa's 4th District Congressman, Congressman Steve King.
Bob, as I said, he nailed the introduction, and I really appreciate the welcome here. I am fired up. I'm fired up because we have the chance. We have the chance to make the first and the best recommendation to the rest of the country on who we think should be the next president of the United States. Okay, we're all here supporting Ted Cruz for president. So you've given me some wonderful opportunities. I'm grateful for every minute that I've had the privilege to represent you, not only in the Iowa Senate, but in the United States Congress, every minute. I go to work every day grateful that God's given me this gift and testing me out every day. And what more can I do each day? Only a little measure of that wisdom so I can go forth and serve your will. And let me do so with joy. And that's what we're all doing here today. We're serving with joy, God and country and state and nation and family and faith. All of this wrapped up in one candidate. And I have had the privilege of getting to know 17 presidential candidates in this cycle. You know, never in the history of the Republic has either party ever fielded such a deep talent pool as the Republican Party has this time around. Never. In fact, it isn't even close. And I said a year ago, I'd draw a name out of the hat and say, Mr. President. Second name and say, Mr. Vice President. And then dump the hat out and arrange it and say, this is the cabinet. I changed my mind on that several months ago. Because I want to decide. I don't want to just pull a name out of a hat. This is a high responsibility that we have here. And I have this wonderful access and opportunity to evaluate. So I've known the candidates personally and professionally, in most cases, both ways. I've had an opportunity to poke them and test them and kick the tires and watch them and work with them and see how they react. And I put my staff to work to analyze where they are in their positions. We go back to their position papers, look at their history, see who stood there and who's fought when the time came, and who feels our spirit in their bones that would carry our values to the Oval Office. And Ted Cruz, I came to one conclusion. Ted Cruz. One man who really does it. One day in 2013, it was June 19th, I couldn't get a debate in the House of Representatives on immigration, even though Marco Rubio and others were pushing the Gang of Eight bill in the Senate at the time. We wanted to push back and fight that down. So what I could do was rent a stage and a microphone. I held an all-day press conference outside the Capitol, because that's what I could get done. And we invited a number of senators to come into the fight with us. House members came. 100 senators over there. How many of them came? You know the answer. One. Who was that? Ted Cruz came and jumped into the fight and jumped up on that stage, and for 45 minutes he delivered chapter and verse of where I believe we stand on the immigration issue. Secure the border, enforce the law, and bring about the respect for the rule of law again, and protect the American workers and protect Americans. That was all there then in 2013. It's all there now. In fact, it's all there in an 11-page document that is part of, go to tedcruz.org. There's an 11-page immigration policy there. He has said to you that Jeff Sessions and Steve King had a lot to do with that. I'm here telling you I'm not disagreeing with Ted Cruz, except it's his position. It's his position. He owns it, and it's a good one, and I stand with him on his immigration position. The Constitution. I carry a Constitution in my pocket every day.
Yeah.
Whenever we have a pledge or the national anthem, I put my hand over my heart. I put my little finger down on that Constitution just to tie it together to my heart. And it's been there next to my heart for years and years. I finally figured out what makes Ted Cruz tick, how I understand him. We talked about a lot of things. We did a 5-hour dinner one night and went through all of these things: faith and family and Constitution and rule of law and American history and the pillars of American exceptionalism. All of that fit up perfectly. A full-spectrum constitutional Christian conservative, Ted Cruz. But I didn't understand him completely until he said one day, well, I was raised with the Bible and the Constitution at the kitchen table. Then I understood. Because I was raised with the Code of Iowa and the Constitution at the kitchen table and the Bible on the end table. I think he has an advantage over me when it comes to that because his Bible is on the kitchen table, not the end table. But I understood when you grow up with that in your bones what that means.
That's right.
Now I know for sure that when the door gets closed on the Oval Office after all the advisors have been kicked out and it's life or death decisions, and maybe the life or death decision of the Republic, I know that Ted Cruz is going to make his decision based upon our principles, and he's going to ask God for that final guidance. So I've said that I am a full-spectrum constitutional Christian conservative, and I've served in Congress for 13 years, and I believe that that definition that I give is an umbrella that we all fit under here. We'd all call ourselves full-spectrum constitutional Christian conservatives. And I want to say to you that all of you have a common belief that I have. I'm going to take a risk here and tell you I don't think anybody will stand up and say that I've ever let you down.
Nope.
And I'm not letting you down this time. I'm 100% confident that Ted Cruz will never let us down, that his foundational values are ours. We will see a strong national defense. We'll see a pro-life president who will make the right appointments to the Supreme Court and all the federal bench. We will see this Constitution restored. We will see the pillars of American exceptionalism refurbished, and our country will be brought forth again. And here it is, that if you look and see how bad Jimmy Carter was, it set the stage for Ronald Reagan, how great Ronald Reagan was. Well, Barack Obama's a lot worse than Jimmy Carter. Just how great is Ted Cruz going to be? Who's for all? We're coming to caucus for Ted Cruz.
Thanks, Steve. My pleasure to introduce the next speaker. And to introduce the speaker, there's some key words that I use with this guy. He's a leader, first off, and that's not because he wants to be a leader. That's because the people keep making him a leader. He's humble. He would be happy doing things without, just outside of what he does. But as he says things, people follow in behind him. He's also a man of truth. I've watched him in public and in private. He doesn't tolerate truth from politicians when they lie to him. He doesn't tolerate it from his own staff. He loves the truth, and because he does, he also speaks the truth. And sometimes it's very hard, but he's very, very good about speaking truth. He's also a visionary. He looks into the future, sees what's about to be, but that's because he looks behind him. Patrick Henry once said, there's no way of judging the future but by the past. And because he has studied what's come before, he is very good about knowing what is yet to come. And he's also a great friend. Proverbs 18:24 says, if you're going to be a friend, you have to show yourself friendly. And this man has shown himself as a friend. He's shown himself as a friend to God, a friend to people of faith, a friend to Americans. He's shown himself as a friend to the Constitution, a friend to core principles. He is a friend of America. He is Glenn Beck.
Yeah, David's a good friend, too.
Hello, Iowa. How are you?
It's really cold here. So glad to see you. Thank you so much. It's actually I'm wearing my grandfather's hat. Well, not now, but I'm wearing my grandfather's hat today because can't hear me. Hold it.
How's that?
I'm wearing my grandfather's hat while I'm here because my grandfather was born just about 30 miles away from here. My grandmother and my mother were born in Applington, Iowa, right? And it feels like old home week, which is really appropriate because of the things I want to talk to you about. First of all, why are we all here? Thought you would answer that. That's not why we're here. We are here. No man is the solution to our problems. We are here really because we all have a simple belief that things can be better, that things don't have to be this hard, that tomorrow will be better. In fact, the future of our children will be better tomorrow than all of our yesterdays combined. That's what we believe as Americans. But America, for the last, at least, maybe as long as 10, 12 years, has started to lose faith in herself. We don't believe the things that we used to. And the world is now looking at us wondering if America is done, and too many of Americans actually wonder themselves whether they're done. I would imagine, as we've been through this drill so many times together, I would imagine that you question somewhat yourself. Is this it? Is this as good as it's going to get? And the reason why we question that is because without vision, the people shall perish. And there is no vision. But we've been here before. It was a very cold day, a little colder than this one. December 24th, 1776, on the banks of the Potomac. We had lost every single battle. George Washington, they were starting to say that he was a crazy man, that he wasn't capable, that he was absolutely the wrong general. And they were there around a campfire that night. We had 20,000 in our military. We were down to just under 2,000. And he was feeling we have to turn around and cross the Delaware. And everyone in the camp with him said, he's a crazy man. He's going to get us all killed. They had lost faith. We had lost faith during the Civil War. We had lost, halfway through, the North had lost every single battle. We were fighting brother against brother, and Lincoln wept. In World War II, we were outgunned. In World War II, we were outmaneuvered. When Japan hit us in 1941, we didn't know what hit us. We weren't ready. We didn't have the ships. We didn't have the planes. America was already tired from the Great Depression. The First World War had worn them out, and evil was spreading the world. I remember hearing the stories of the Depression and World War II from my grandparents, and still to this day, I don't know how, if you lived in those times, you didn't think, my gosh, this is the time of Christ's return. Evil, unlike we had ever seen, was spreading all over the world. Then we were beaten down by the 60s, and the violence in the streets in the 60s, and the corruption of the 70s, and the burning helicopters in Iran, and the gas lines that were around the block, and interest rates that were at 18%. But here's the news I'm going to give to you today. The good news is that is always when America is at her best. When we're down on the mat. When we're down on the mat and everybody else is saying 8, 9, that's when we come roaring back. We find ourselves again. We reroute ourselves in eternal principles, and we change the world. Let's not forget who we are. That's right. We are the people that brought literal light to the world with a light bulb and the radio and the automobile and the telephone. We're the only nation that landed on the moon and on Mars. Our farmlands feed the world. We're the birthplace of the dreamers that brought us Microsoft and Apple and Google. And here in Iowa, there are kids this age that are just beginning to start to have dreams of their own and starting to say, maybe I can change the world. And because they are born in America, because they live in this great nation, they actually will change the world. That's who we are. That's who we are, and that's who we have forgotten. That's what we have forgotten, and no president will ever give you that. Nobody, I don't care who he is, no man can give you that. And no matter how hard the last administration has tried, no man can snuff that out. And it's what we yearn for. It's what the people who live on another continent, who look across the ocean, that's what they yearn for. That's what the people who are now wasting away in some Iranian prison, or people who are working in some slave shop in China, or are actually on the slave auction block for ISIS. This is what they live for. This is what they dream of, what we have. But where are we? We're lost. We're hopeless. Many people in our country are angry. We stand at the crossroads of fundamental transformation. Hear me. That's what he set out to do, our last president, to fundamentally transform the United States of America. But it will be the next president that finishes that transformation one way or another. What has happened in the last 100 years with the progressive movement will either be stopped dead in its tracks by the next president, or our country and our Constitution will be lost as we understand it.
Yes, sir.
So how do we put ourselves back on the right track? How do we get there? What is it that we need? The press today has been reporting that I am here to endorse Ted Cruz. But let me tell you, in 40 years of broadcast, I have never endorsed any candidate. And I haven't endorsed any candidate mainly because for a lot of those years, nobody really wanted my endorsement. And quite honestly, I've never endorsed anybody because I don't trust any of the weasels, no matter how good they are. So today, I want to talk to you about principles. We spoke of these principles day after day after day on Fox. I still do day after day after day on radio and on the Blaze. They boil down to three things: faith, hope, and charity. Faith, hope, and charity. The first one is faith in God. You want to restore our country, you want to restore our Constitution, and have a better tomorrow for our children. Faith in God, but not showman faith.
That's right.
Not the things that you might have read about in 2 Corinthians. but the faith that changes you. The faith that goes into your heart and changes everything. The way you see, the way you act, the way you behave. So we need that in a leader, and we should all ask ourselves, by their fruits ye shall know them. By their fruits ye shall know them. So what are the fruits of the presidential candidates? What are they? Does your candidate, whoever it is you're thinking about, and I hope there are people that are thinking about other candidates that are here. We have really good candidates that are running, really good. I wouldn't have thought 5 or 8 years ago that we could have this many good, solid candidates. We have them. But ask yourself, whoever it is you're voting for, what are their fruits? Does your candidate have a record of years of standing boldly for your right to worship, to make sure that the 10 Commandments are in public spaces, winning the Heller case, so you have the right to the Second Amendment? Does your candidate have the record of going against his own party, his own president, George W. Bush, to stand to make sure that a dirtbag illegal immigrant who had come in and horribly, brutally raped and murdered actually was not saved by the international court, but faced the courts of Texas and received the penalty of death as they deserved. As your candidate spent his entire life to make sure that you have those constitutional rights that you were endowed by your Creator to have, the George Washington that we need will be found in the quiet yet bold service, standing tirelessly for those principles that we all say are self-evident. Where does your candidate find his treasure? Does he find his treasure in gold, or is his treasure somewhere else? And we have to look at faith in another way. Faith in God is paramount. But there's another. And I checked this over and over again, for God forbid I say and misquote somebody here, that'll be the only thing that the press will run. So I checked this over and over again to make sure it was exactly right. Mr. Trump is saying over and over again on the road, I will make America great again. I will make America great. That's not true. It's not even possible. Each of us as individuals, living our own dreams, making our own way, charting our own course, that is what makes America great. Anything else is faith in self, and it is empty. It's the human ego, and it is arrogant, and it is dangerous. We have already had a president tell us in the last few years, you didn't build that. You didn't build that. We knew that was wrong. This is the same thing. I'll make America great. No, we the people will make America great. It's the tell of a progressive president. And you have to watch for them. The Republicans don't want to hear this now, but I've been saying it's why I was only invited to speak at CPAC one time, because I brought the chalkboard out and I said, you guys started it. Progressivism is in both parties, and you must look for the tell. It is just as dangerous on our side as it is on their side. The next president cannot be a repeat of this president, who thought with a stroke of his pen he could make the seas recede, or that he was worthy of a Nobel Peace Prize just because he showed up. We need a president that is a servant of God and a servant of the Constitution. He must have less faith in himself and more faith in God, the Constitution, and the American people. One is hope, faith, and hope. Where does hope come from? Hope is elusive unless you know its root, and its root is the truth. The reason why God can give people such hope in the face of such adversity is because you know the truth of God. So only with the truth is there hope. A cancer patient will say the same thing to the doctor over and over again. Just shoot straight with me. Just tell me the truth. Why? Because they know if you tell me, fill me full of lies, it'll be false hope and I'll be dead. Tell me how bad it is, doc, and then tell me and chart the course and we'll make it together. That gives a man or a woman hope. So here it is. Here's the truth. This may come down, our Constitution, our entire history as a nation, may come down to what you do a week from Monday. Right. metastasized cancer. And it is not just progressivism, the enemy of the Constitution. It is hopelessness. It is despair. It is anger. It's racism. It's cronyism. It's lawlessness, unlike anything I have ever witnessed at the highest levels. This, I believe, may be our last shot to save the Republic of the Constitution, or the United States of America. And we are lying to ourselves. We're lying to ourselves, and we're accepting the lies from the politicians. And let me just start with the elephant in the room. Here's the biggest lie that no one will say out loud that needs to be spoken. Hillary Clinton should be in prison. After he lied, and my father said they're all like that, they're just singling him out. I knew it was wrong then with a Republican. It's wrong with a Democrat today. The law is the law. If I can go to prison, you should go to prison. That comes from truth. You don't have faith in the political system. You don't have hope because there is no truth in the system. The same thing with the economy. They tell us it's getting better, it's getting better, it's getting better. No, it's not. It's rigged. It is rigged. Our banks, our big businesses, they are rigged. Capitalism has become a cruel joke. If you don't have connections, if you don't have a high-priced attorney, or you're unwilling to pay to play, capitalism means nothing to you. Our politicians now accept legal bribes or outrageous speaking fees, and they take these fees for special favors, and they exchange those special favors, and our conservative candidates actually stand on the stage and boast about writing those checks for politicians. And we're supposed to say it's okay, because they will say that's just the way business is done. Damn it, no, it is not. We cannot accept that. We must not continue to lower the bar. We have to start raising the bar. We must do the right thing, even if it is at our own expense. How many of us would die today if it meant that our children would live a brighter, better day tomorrow? That's who we are. It's time to start doing the hard things, but demanding that our politicians do it as well. That means they have to tell the truth about our jobs, the rigged game of cronyism, race, Islam, terror on the streets of Chicago, our failing families, and the role that each of us as individuals play. The hard truth. Most of you know my history. And if you don't, hello, my name is Glenn and I'm an alcoholic. I was terrified the first time I said that. I was actually trying to throw my career away. I stood on the air and I said, you know what? You think you know me, you don't know me, I'm a bad guy, and here's what's happening in my life. That day saved me. Admitting my problems saved me. You know the story of my life, not because somebody exposed me, but because I felt it was important to tell you. Why? Because it tells you how I view the world. How did I come to those conclusions? Where was I in my past, and how is it that I believe these things now? If we don't speak honestly with ourselves and others, we cannot grow. But I tell you this also because I want you to understand, I truly believe in pivot points. The point in your life where things are so out of control that you're just like, I can't do it anymore. That's when a man changes. When there is a crisis in his life, a man changes fundamentally or dies. I also believe in redemption. The hope of the world does not come from our mistakes, but our admitting them, falling to our knees and begging for forgiveness, and then changing our life. That's the hope of the world. And there are many great candidates, but I want to be honest with you. I mean this sincerely. It's down to two. It's down to two. And the press has already picked, and so has the establishment, who the winner is. And if it is even close, you might lose everything. If you believe like I believe. We're at that point. And so we have to look at people. It's a two-person race. The other guy has said that he hasn't done anything in his life that actually makes him feel like he should ask forgiveness from God. The hubris of that is astonishing. As if for the last 8 years we have watched a narcissist in the Oval Office and it's meant nothing to us. It's frightening, the hubris. Now, I can't judge his soul. I don't want to judge his soul. We're not supposed to judge his soul. But I'm telling you now, as citizens, we are required to judge a man's record.
Yes.
And his record is very clear. I have not heard a pivot point. Not one. Not one. What happened in his life that was so tragic, so important, that he changed almost every fundamental principle he has held since birth? Now think of this. We're not talking about slight differences in policy. We are talking about I'm a die-hard person for abortion, I'm against abortion. And all the way down the line, what happened in his life that should give us a clue that says, yes, I know that happened, but you can believe him. You can believe him. He has not talked about that. Why? Why? He doesn't, it's up to him to ask for God's forgiveness. But I would like to suggest to you that the man owes America an apology, and he should ask conservatives in America for forgiveness for supporting billions of dollars of bailouts, for calling for the nationalization of our banks. He should ask for forgiveness for giving money to prop up Anthony Weiner, Nancy Pelosi, and Rahm Emanuel. And while all of us were standing up for our principles and marching and being ridiculed about being little teabaggers, while that was going on in 2010, and we were giving everything and looking each other in the eye and truly saying, my life, my fortune, and my sacred honor, he was writing a check to Mitch McConnell and Harry Reid. I think an apology is in order at the very least. Honesty, faith, and truth are basic requirements. And quite honestly, I have to tell you, this probably is not going to go over real well, but that's why I like Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders is like, yep, I'm a socialist. Yep, I think there's 2 R's in America, one in the middle and one in the end. America. That's just who I am. I can actually sit at a table with a man who says, yes, I'm a socialist, and yes, I don't like what we're doing. We should be more like Denmark. What we really need in America is enough of these politicians who are telling us what we want to hear, hiding behind fancy language, and actually have a debate between a constitutionalist like Ted Cruz and a socialist like Bernie Sanders. And let's really decide. The last principle is charity. And this one is so important to America. We're the most charitable nation in the world. We always have been. And nobody had to make us that way. It's who we are. It's in our heart because we know the truth and because we have faith. We are automatically charitable. But even this is lost on us. We do need a safety net for people who truly need it. And we must keep our promises to people that we have made those promises to. But I think it needs to start with our veterans. We made promises to our veterans. They with their hands tied behind their back. There should be no rules of engagement at a hospital when they go to be healed. But we do this not by some bureaucrat. We do this by a president who recognizes the Constitution and says, get out of the way of the public sector. Let the medical professionals do what they do best and want to do, heal. But charity also, it's important for us to realize that a new time is coming. We must look at charity ourselves. We must no longer look away from the alcoholic, the out of work, the orphan, the single struggling mom, those who mourn or those who are afraid. We must take personal responsibility. These are the values of Iowa. They're the values of the heartland. They always have been. We've just lost the coasts. The coasts have been lost. We just need to make that an American principle again, that we have a responsibility. The Good Samaritan didn't call a government. He wasn't like, give me the blue pages and the yellow book. I need to find out who to take care of this guy. He picked him up himself. He took him. He helped heal him. He watched over him. It's our responsibility. The government isn't the solution. The government is the problem. We are the solution. But while we're on charity, our next president must understand that charity can never be used as a tool. To simply take the bread from another man's sweat is wrong, simply because you don't want to work. So that means that this misguided idea of compassion must end. FDR said, if you take a man's ability to work away from him, if you don't give him the ability to work, you will take away his self-worth. Ben Franklin, who's the guy who started the first volunteer fireman, the first public hospital, he gave away the Lincoln or the Franklin stove because others could be warmed, and he didn't want to charge anybody for it. His own choice. Even this charitable man said, at times, the best way to help people is to compassionately make them feel uncomfortable in their poverty. But here's where the compassion comes in. By strengthening people and encouraging them to do what they must and should do for themselves, we build strong and engaged citizens who have faith and hope in a better future. And charity begins at home. If we don't get a hold of our borders, if our next president is as lax on these borders as the last few presidents have been, we are done as a nation. We are the lifeboat for the world. But if others come in to swamp the lifeboat, nobody's going to be helped. And all those who wish to do us harm or to bleed us dry must be sent home. The last point I want to make on charity is this. And this one's hard for me personally. Donald Trump has spent an awful lot of airtime today mocking and ridiculing me. And that's totally fine. I mean, look at me. It's not hard to do. We have to be more charitable towards each other. We're at each other's throats right now. Everybody seems to be an enemy just because we disagree. It doesn't make us sellouts or traitors. I read somebody, an extremist on the right. An extremist said of Mark Levin, just because he stood for Ted Cruz this week, he called him in a publication a filthy Jew. This isn't who we are. Left and right, Christian, non, black, white, all of it. But that's not who we are. We're Americans. And if we're deeply rooted in our principles, if what we're fighting for is rooted in principles, then we just disagree on the way to get there. And is that way liberty, constitutional liberty, or tyranny? which is the way? I believe that we are a nation of laws and not of men. But we have lost that. So who is it that will lead us back to that place? Last names don't mean anything, even if you splash it on the back of a plane, or your husband was the president, or your brother and your dad were president. It doesn't mean anything. Who are you? Our laws and our principles and our values. That's what means something. What's broken in our country is not our economy. What's broken in our country is our faith in God and our faith in each other, our faith in our principles and our values. So a lot of people are voting because I think this guy he'll fix it. No, we'll fix it. God will fix it. Our principles will fix it. They brought us this far. They will take us home again. Our next president will choose up to 4 Supreme Court justices. What is currently being won 5-4 in this next term could be lost 8-1. We do not recover. And even with the most benign, friendly, happy progressives like the Bushes, they have just a touch of progressivism. Look at who they chose for the Supreme Court. Look what happened, John Roberts. We must have someone who knows the Supreme Court and knows the next 4 we get. The time for silliness and reality show tactics is past. It's been fun. But Iowa, I beg you, my children's future depend on what you do a week from Monday. I told Ted Cruz before he was senator, he came into my office and he was on the air with us for a while. And we grilled him. I didn't know who he was. And quite honestly, I mean, he kind of talks like a politician, you know? But I've seen him with his boots off and kick back on the couch with his hands behind him. And that's who he is all the time. So that's not like, he's in politician mode. No, that's him all the time. And it's real. But I didn't know it at the time. I just watched him and I thought, you say all the right things. And I took him in the office and I said it to him on the air, but I said it to him in person. And I said, I just want you to know, if you're not who you say you are, I'm going to be your worst nightmare. I don't have any friends in Washington for a reason. I tell the truth. And I have watched him. I have watched him relentlessly. And the great thing is, it's the David and Goliath story. You want somebody with guts? You want somebody who's bold? It's not some guy who's got a bunch of, money, strip clubs in casinos. It's a guy who stands on his principles relentlessly when everybody in the media, everybody in the other party, and everybody in his own party says, I ain't with you, man. You're a loser. I'm going to stop you. And he's going to stand against it. This is the American story. We root for the little guy. We still look for that guy who stands against all odds. That's who we are at our core. There's a lot of great people running. I like Marco Rubio. I have some real problems with his policies, especially on the NSA. But I like him. He's a decent man. Ben Carson, a really good, decent, honorable, God-fearing man. I just don't think he's ready. I wish he was, but I don't think he's ready. Rand Paul, strong on the Constitution and a good guy. But I will tell you this. If Ted Cruz, those guys are not going to win in Iowa. They might win down the road, they're not going to win in Iowa. And if Donald Trump wins, it's going to be a snowball to hell. It is important, if you believe any of the things that I have said today, it is important that you find where you're supposed to caucus. It's crazy, this system of yours is nuts. Move to Texas, we make it easy. But we don't count, you do. You will decide, I may never get a chance to vote for my guy if you don't get out and vote. So, our choice is clear. Do we stand with the bullies? Do we stand with the people who buy and sell favors, those who destroy, smear, use every Saul Alinsky tactic because the ends justify the means? Or do we stand with the little guy who still believes that if you do the right thing, if you play by the rules, you work hard, you're tireless in your efforts, that you will change the world, that you will win, but yet is humble enough to know that it's not about winning. It's about how you play the game that really counts. That's who we need to find. The next president, and I've told all of them this, and I've said this on the air, and I mean this sincerely, and I mean this with everything. Everybody mocked me on the caliphate, but I knew that to be true. And I will tell you this, people may mock me on this, but I am telling you now, we are at that crossroad. And if we do not do the right thing, God can only give us so much. It's up to us. If we do not do the right thing, the next president is facing at least what Lincoln faced. Trouble the size of Lincoln. And the next president may end up being Lincoln and in all that means. I've said this to every candidate, and I can tell you, most of them, not all of them, most of them look at me, then look down at the ground, and look back up and say, I know. Ted Cruz knows. He must be Lincoln, and he may also have to be Washington. Because the next guy who comes in, he either finishes the job that Woodrow Wilson started, or he repoints the cornerstones. A collapse is coming. Whether we are knocked out and fundamentally transformed will be up to us and you next Monday. But he has to repoint the cornerstone. So who does that? Who is the man that will have malice toward none and can bind the wounds of our nation? Ted Cruz. I brought this today out of the vaults that we have in our studios where we keep things that are just really, really rare and precious. Ted, is Ted backstage? Can he come up? I hope he is, because I'm done. Ted, come on. But here's a man who knows, Ted, what is the oath of office that you would have to take? What? Dear God, if you don't know this. Everyone knows. When you raise your right hand, what are you going to have to say?
I will pledge to honor and defend the Constitution of the United States of America.
Okay. Honor and defend the Constitution. Not to make sure that there's two chickens in every pot, not to make sure that he equals out wealth disparity, not to make sure that we don't have warm weather or anything like that, but to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. This man was spoon-fed from a child the Bible and the Constitution. He knows the cornerstone and where it needs to be pointed. This is George Washington's compass. It's the only compass he ever owned. He was a surveyor. So every battle he was ever at, everything he ever did. And Ted, I want you to hold this and put your finger right here. Hold it there. See if you can feel. You feel the thumbprint? I'm convinced it's where Washington, as he was thinking, did this and thought. And the reason why is because I did a show one time on Fox where I could have said some very nasty things about some people, and I had a long list of people to say those things about. And I didn't want to. And I took that and I put it in my pocket. And all during that show, if you knew what episode it was, you would see my hand is in the pocket, and I am rubbing that compass, saying, stay true, stay true. I'm taking a very big risk here and gamble, but this is how much I believe in Ted Cruz. I'd like you to hold on to that as you're going through and people are slinging mud, to make sure that your compass is square and that you stay true to the values that I made. Let me just say this last thing. I can't believe I actually have to say this, but for the first time in a long time, the press was right. I am here to announce that I am officially endorsing Ted Cruz to become the first Hispanic president of the United States, the first generation president of the United States, the most conservative president of the United States since Ronald Reagan, and the next president of the United States, Ted Cruz.
It is not often that I'm speechless. God bless the great state of Iowa. Let me say, Dave Barton, Bob Vanderplas, Steve King, Glenn Beck. What an incredible, humbling, powerful privilege to stand with warriors for liberty. These are men of principle. These are men of honor. These are men who love our Constitution. These are men who love God. And these are men who are not afraid to stand and speak the truth, no matter what the consequences. In times of great peril, God has always elevated leaders, and we have seen a panoply of leaders elevated to stand for this country. And I got to tell you, every time Glenn speaks, I learn something. Everyone here, I think, has received an hour of college credit from the Bible College for Glenn Beck University. Kind of puts everything in perspective, doesn't it? What the stakes are. I will say this. For a Texan, it's cold outside. But you know, as cold as it is in Iowa, it's even colder in Washington, D.C. A blizzard hit Washington. Shut down the government. Mainstream media immediately blamed it on. I saw a blizzard in Washington. I was confused. I thought Al Gore said this wouldn't happen. I mean, it was cold there. It is cold there. It is so cold in Washington. It is so cold, I actually saw a Democrat with his hands in his own pockets. actually Hillary, and she was hiding an email server. 9 days. 9 days between now and the Iowa caucuses. 9 days in a battle that will decide the direction of this country. Every one of us is here for one reason. We love this country and we recognize America is in crisis. We love our children. We love our grandchildren. And I will tell you, we have reason to be encouraged. You know, the Word tells us, weeping may endure for a night, but joy cometh in the morning. Across this country, there has been a great deal of weeping. We've seen the fundamental values of this country being torn down, but from Washington, D.C., torn down by politicians in both parties. And yet I want to give you a word of hope and encouragement and exhortation. The American people are waking up. There is an awakening and there is a spirit of revival that is sweeping this country. You know, Glenn was right. No one person can turn this country around. It is only God's blessing working through we the people that can pull this country back from the brink. But every one of us understands the stakes. I'm curious, has anyone else in this room ever been burned by a politician? We see it over and over and over again. Politicians come, they give a great talk, they say exactly what we want to hear. And then they go to Washington and they don't do what they said they would do. We keep winning elections. Hooray, a Republican House. Hooray, a Republican Senate. And what on earth do they do with it? Over and over and over again. The stakes are too high this election. In 2016, we cannot get burned again. So how do we decide? How do we as voters decide? How do we avoid getting burned again? You're a step ahead of me. As Glenn rightly noted, Scripture tells us you shall know them by their fruits. Let me give a bit of suggestion. Listen, every Republican, when they run for president, stands up and says they're a conservative. Have you noticed that? Have you noticed that not a single person on that debate stage stands up and says, "Hi, I'm a squishy establishment moderate. I stand for absolutely nothing." They don't say that. By the way, what a tribute to the men and women here that establishment politicians are spending millions of dollars trying to convince us that they believe what we do. So here's my advice. Don't listen to any of us. Don't listen to me, and don't listen to anybody else on that stage. Instead of listening to what we say, ask, "Show me what you've done." Show me your walk. Show me your path. I had an old boss who used to say, if I'm ever accused of being a Christian, I'd like for there to be enough evidence to convict me. I'm going to suggest a way for us not to get burned again. Ronald Reagan talked about a time for choosing, lines in the ground, where men and women decide on which side of the line do I stand. And I want to walk through 7 times for choosing. The first is life. Life is the fundamental and first value. If we have no life, No liberty follows, no pursuit of happiness follows. The right to life is fundamental to all. Just this week, we saw the tragic anniversary of Roe versus Wade, a decision that has authored in the death of over 50 million unborn children. Now, in a Republican primary, every candidate will tell you they're pro-life. That's what Republicans do in presidential primaries. The question we ought to ask is, tell me, when have you stood up and fought for the right to life? Before being in the Senate, I was the Solicitor General of Texas, the chief lawyer for the state in front of the U.S. Supreme Court. We led a coalition of states before the U.S. Supreme Court defending the federal ban on partial birth abortion, and we won 5-4. We led another coalition of states before the U.S. Supreme Court defending the state of New Hampshire's parental notification law, and we won unanimously. And when the state of Texas passed legislation prohibiting taxpayer funding for Planned Parenthood, a local district court struck it down. I personally argued the appeal in the Court of Appeals, and we won unanimously defunding Planned Parenthood. Now, if the right to life matters to you, if it is a core principle in your life, then the question each of us has to ask: who can we trust? Who has a record on this? I will tell you this: if a candidate has spent the first 60 years of their life supporting partial birth abortion, it raises a question of what they might do in the White House. If a candidate today, as a candidate for president, says we should continue funding for Planned Parenthood, taxpayer funding, it gives us real reason to doubt whether that candidate would lift a finger to defend life. I'll tell you this: if I'm elected president on the first day in office, I will direct the Department of Justice to open an investigation into Planned Parenthood and to prosecute any and all criminal violations. If life matters, there's a real difference in terms of records. Let's talk about a second time for choosing: marriage and religious liberty. Marriage is foundational to the family. The best home for children is a home with a mother and father who are married, who love each other and raise their children in a loving family. A great many Americans don't experiencing that. I come from a family where a lot of the people in my family were single moms. And indeed, for a period, I was raised by a single mom. When my dad left my mother, and it was only my father's coming to the Lord, giving his life to Jesus, that brought our family back together. For 7 years, we've seen a relentless assault on marriage and religious liberty from Washington, D.C. I still remember the week that President Obama first came out against traditional marriage. Heidi and I are members of First Baptist Church in Houston. I remember our pastor, it was Mother's Day that particular weekend, and our pastor got up and he was getting ready to preach his sermon. And he actually had a little fishing pond and a fishing pole. He never uses props, but for whatever reason, he had them that morning. And our pastor stood up and said, "You know what? I was all prepared to give a terrific sermon on Mother's Day." And he said, "God won't let me give that sermon.
Because this past week, for the first time in the history of our nation, the President of the United States has come out against marriage as the union of one man and one woman. And our pastor simply called on every member of the congregation. He said, we're not going to have a sermon this morning. I just ask each of us to get down on our knees and lift up this country in prayer. The Supreme Court's decision on marriage in June of last year. 5 unelected judges purported to tear down the marriage laws of all 50 states. They ignored the Constitution. They ignored the law of the land. They claimed to have more enlightened wisdom than what mankind has understood for millennia. Long before there was a United States, long before there was a Supreme Court, marriage was ordained by God as the union of one man and one woman. When that decision came down, that was another time for choosing. Any Republican candidate who responded to the gay marriage decision by saying, it is the settled law of the land, we must surrender, accept it, and move on. Those are word for words the talking points of Barack Obama. Several of the individuals on that debate stage, that was their position, including the 2 leading contenders who were my competitors in this state. They said, it's settled, it's the law of the land, accept it, and move on. In my view, anyone that echoes Barack Obama in handing authority over the court to tear down marriage, we should know exactly what they would do as president, which is they would be unwilling to defend marriage. And when it comes to religious liberty is the very first liberty protected in the First Amendment of the Bill of Rights. It is foundational. The right that this nation was founded by brave men and women fleeing religious oppression and coming to a land where we could seek out and worship the Lord God Almighty with all of our hearts, minds, and souls without government getting in the way. Religious liberty for me has been a core principle, has been a tenet that I have been fighting for decades. Fighting to defend the 10 Commandments on the state capitol grounds, going to the Supreme Court, and winning 5-4. Fighting to defend the Pledge of Allegiance, the words, one nation under God, going to the Supreme Court, and winning unanimously. Fighting to defend the Mojave Desert Veterans Memorial, representing 3 million veterans defending a lone white Latin cross, going to the Supreme Court and winning 5-4. I look here and see my friends Dick and Betty Odegaard, 2 Iowa natives who are standing for their religious faith. They lost the historic Lutheran church that they had owned because they were persecuted, because they were told they had to host and celebrate a homosexual wedding or face persecution by the government. You know, we hosted a religious liberty rally some months ago here in Iowa. It was an incredible rally with 9 heroes, including Dick and Betty, that just told their stories. Ordinary people. A florist, a baker, a soldier, a fireman, who stood for their faith and were persecuted. If you believe religious liberty is fundamental, then the question we should ask of every one of these candidates is not, what do we say on the campaign trail? It's easy to say on the campaign trail, I'll defend religious liberty. Ask of every candidate, what have you ever done in your life to stand and fight for religious liberty? A third time for choosing was the battle over guns in 2013. You're reading ahead. We all remember the tragic shooting in Newtown, Connecticut, where a sick, deranged individual murdered little children. Heidi and I, as the father of 2 little girls, and mother of 2 little girls. And by the way, thank God our girls look like their mother. Proof that God is a benevolent God. But in the wake of that horrific shooting, President Obama could have chosen to try to bring us together, could have chosen to work with Democrats and Republicans and say, let's target violent criminals, let's come down on them like a ton of bricks. But instead, following his chief of staff's advice, you never want to let a good crisis go to waste. What did the president do? He did the same thing he did after San Bernardino. He said, I'm going to go after the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms of law-abiding citizens. Well, I'll tell you, millions of Americans across this country rose up to defend our Second Amendment rights. Look, our Second Amendment right is a fundamental right in the Bill of Rights. And by the way, it's not about hunting. It's not about target shooting. Both of those are great fun, but that's not why the Second Amendment is in the Bill of Rights. The Second Amendment is in the Bill of Rights because if anyone comes into your home to harm your family, to harm your children, you have a natural God-given right to keep and bear arms and defend your family. When millions of Americans rose up to defend the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms against a federal government that was trying to undermine it, I was proud, I was honored to lead that fight standing with the people. The question you should ask of every other candidate on that stage, all of them say they support the Second Amendment. Where were they? If they support the Second Amendment, we had a fight. It was fundamental. It was the president trying to undermine the Second Amendment. If you really support it, your actions could demonstrate it by standing up, suiting up, and reporting for battle. A fourth time for choosing. Obamacare. Take Obamacare. Please, take Obamacare. In 2013, millions of Americans across this country rose up in an incredible tidal wave to say, stop this disaster. We don't want it taking our jobs, forcing us into part-time work, taking our health care, taking our doctor, driving our premiums through the roof. That was a moment where I was proud to stand with millions of Americans to try to give voice to the frustration, to the anger, to the rage. Why is the government undermining my ability to keep me and my family safe? That was another moment, a time for choosing. As you look to the other very, very fine individuals standing on that debate stage, the question will naturally arise. If you say you oppose Obamacare, where were you in 2013? When the fight is being fought, where did you stand? When the line was in the ground, on which side did you stand? And let me say right now, if a Republican candidate has, for over 60 years of his life, embraced a Bernie Sanders-style socialized medicine for all, and if that candidate still today, as a Republican candidate for president, supports a Bernie Sanders socialized medicine for all, is there any chance on earth that that candidate would actually repeal Obamacare? Do not listen to what we say. Look at what we do. I'll tell you, if I am elected president, we will repeal every word of Obamacare. choosing is taking on the cronyism of the Washington cartel. I've said many times the biggest divide we've got in this country, it's politically, it's not between Democrats and Republicans. It is between career politicians in Washington in both parties and the American people. Every candidate on that debate stage says, vote for me and I will stand up to Washington. Okay, great. Natural next question. When have you ever stood up to Washington? We should ask of every candidate who has stood up to Washington, who's taken on not just Democrats, but leaders in our own party. And I will tell you this, if you never have, nobody on earth ever grew a backbone after they got in 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. If a Republican candidate for president supported Barack Obama's TARP bailout of the big Wall Street banks, if a Republican candidate for president supported Barack Obama's stimulus and said the only problem is it needs to be bigger, is there any chance on earth that individual would actually stand up to the cronyism and cartel in Washington? No. Don't listen to what we say, look at what we do. The sixth battle, the sixth time for choosing, was the battle over amnesty. Now we had, in 2013 as well, an epic knockdown, drag-out battle on amnesty. President Obama and Chuck Schumer and Harry Reid and the Democrats joined up with establishment Republicans to try to pass a massive amnesty bill. The bill didn't secure our borders. The bill expanded President Obama's ability to bring in Syrian refugees without mandating background checks. And the bill would have granted amnesty to 12 million people here illegally. For everyone in this country, that was a time for choosing on which side do you stand. Now, there are individuals on that stage that answered that question and said, I stand with Chuck Schumer and Barack Obama, and I stand against the American people. I can tell you, I was proud to stand shoulder to shoulder with Iowa's own Steve King and Jeff Sessions. Fighting to stop amnesty, to secure the border, to keep this country safe. Now, the leader of that move for amnesty was my friend Marco Rubio. He's a good man, he's charming. But when he ran for Senate in Florida, he promised the people of Florida, if you elect me, I will lead the fight against amnesty. That's what he told the voters. And then he came to Washington and immediately joined with Chuck Schumer in authoring the Rubio-Schumer amnesty bill. Now, you remember when Glenn talked about if you're not who you say you are, if you break your word to the voters, I will be your worst enemy. Look, what I would say to each of you, hold me accountable, hold all of us accountable. Good, yes, the stakes are too high. But I would note as well, there's another candidate in this race who talks quite a bit about immigration and everything else.
Mostly about himself.
Well, in 2013, the battle was being fought. If it is in fact the case that Mr. Trump opposes amnesty, one might ask, where was he during that battle? Well, I can tell you where he was. He was publicly at the time supporting amnesty, tweeting out support for the Gang of Eight. He was publicly at the time supporting Marco Rubio's Dreamer legislation. He was publicly at the time criticizing Mitt Romney for being too tough on illegal immigration. Now, when it comes to amnesty, even today, listen, I like Donald Trump. He may say unpleasant things about me. I have no intention of responding in kind. I do not intend to insult him. I like and respect him. And I respect the men and women here, the men and women of Iowa, too much. I don't think you want or deserve to see politicians engaging in name-calling and insults. But I do think substance matters. I think record matters. I think issues matter. And I will point out that even right now today, Mr. Trump supports amnesty. Mr. Trump's proposal, everyone knows, he proposes to deport everyone here illegally. But then he says as soon as they get back, he'll let them back in and let them become citizens. By the way, this is a proposal establishment Republicans have talked about an awful lot. It's called touchback. Touchback means you fly them back to the country, they touch the ground, and then they come back magically on a path to citizenship. Now, he's entitled to advocate for that. A lot of establishment Republicans have advocated for that. But he doesn't get to pretend it's not amnesty when he's making 12 million people here illegally into 12 million U.S. citizens. And let me say, in 2013, it's worth remembering what the stakes were in that battle. The Rubio-Schumer Gang of Eight amnesty bill had passed the United States Senate. Republican leadership, John Boehner in the House, intended to take it up and pass it with the votes of the Democrats, to overrule almost all the Republicans and pass it with the votes of the Democrats. If you doubt that, talk to Steve King and ask him exactly where it was headed. This was the battle. If that had happened and it landed on Barack Obama's desk, it'd be a done deal. This fight would have been lost. So if you, in fact, care about securing the borders, care about stopping amnesty, what you did right there and then demonstrated your commitment to the battle.
Here, here.
And the seventh and final time for choosing that I want to focus on is standing up to Iran and radical Islamic terrorism. The single greatest national security threat facing this country is the threat of a nuclear array. The most important determination the men and women of Iowa will make, the men and women of this country will make, is who is best prepared to be commander-in-chief. Who has the experience, who has the knowledge, who has the judgment, who has the temperament, who has the clarity of vision and strength of resolve to kill our enemies and to keep this country safe. And so the question we should ask is, who has stood up and led the fight against this Iranian nuclear deal? Who has stood up and led the fight to go after radical Islamic terrorism? Who is prepared to keep this country safe? And I will say this, any candidate who says they will get into office and leave in place Obama's catastrophic nuclear deal does not understand the nature of the Ayatollah Khamenei. If I am elected president, on the first day in office, I will rip to shreds this Iranian nuclear deal. Iowa have 9 days. 9 days to make this choice. If y'all agree with me that the stakes have never been higher, that we are fighting to save this country, it's now or never. We are at the edge of a cliff. And we either pull back or we risk losing the greatest country in the history of the world. If you agree with me, then I want to ask each and every one of you to do 3 things. Number 1, join us. Commit today, right now. Yes, I will come out on Monday night and caucus and stand with you. I can't win this race, but you can. That is the strength of this campaign. It is the grassroots. It is we, the people. I believe in the men and women of Iowa. Second thing I want to ask of each of you is that you volunteer. That you sign up today and commit. Be a precinct leader, be a county leader. Commit right now to pick up the phone and call your mom. It's actually a good idea to call your mom anyway. Call your sister or your son or your next door neighbor or your college roommate and say, this election matters. Please come out and join me. It matters for my kids, for my grandkids. Every one of you, I want to ask every person here to vote for me 10 times. Now look, we're not Democrats. I'm not suggesting voter fraud. But if every one of you gets 9 other Iowans to come out and caucus on Monday night, you will have voted 10 times. This is the fight right now. Listen, y'all in this great state will be beset by millions of dollars of attack ads, of TV ads, of radio ads, of mailers, with more and more and more horrific attacks and lies. And as you get closer to caucus night, it'll get worse and worse. By the way, the mailers make really good kindling in your fireplace. They light up fast. But you know, we're at a stage where the silliness, where the Washington games, where the distortions, they don't matter. This campaign, I believe, will be decided friend to friend, neighbor to neighbor, pastor to pastor, one Iowan to another. And so what I ask of each of you is that you very directly reach out and win this race together. The third and final thing I want to ask of everyone is that you pray. That you commit for the next 9 days, each and every day, to lift this country up in prayer. That you spend just 1 minute a day. In the morning when you get up, when you're shaving, when you're having lunch, when you're putting your kids down to sleep. When you're lying down in bed, you spend just 1 minute saying, Father God, please continue this awakening, continue this spirit of revival. Awaken the body of Christ that we might pull back from this abyss. Yeah. I will tell you, it is a powerful thing to look at the compass held by George Washington. I did not know Glenn was going to give this to me. Loan it to me. It is an amazing reminder of what the stakes are. That when this country